Good evening, gang. David Gupple, Thinker Farmer here. This is part 2 in a series on cornerstones of management. If you haven't watched the first video, go back and watch it and then come to this video. It's a couple episodes back. It'll help to explain where we're at today because I'm not going to waste time repeating myself. It's the end of a work day. I want to get home to family and whatnot, but wanted to shoot a quick video and kind of explain the rest of the cornerstones of management. So again, if you've not watched the first video, go back and watch it, then come back to this video. I'm essentially discussing 10 cornerstones of management. These are principles that apply to any business. They're especially important in a farming business because farming businesses are some of the tightest run with some of the hardest cash flows or lengthy cash flows and toughest turnarounds. Anyway, so cornerstones of management. Timing is an important consideration in anything you're doing on your farm or ranch. You're always asking yourself when, and I'm actually going to lump these next 3 together because management is all about knowing how to get things done. Leadership is knowing what needs to get done. Management is about figuring out how to do things right and getting it done in the most efficient manner. A leader is thinking about being effective. A manager is thinking about efficiency. So, forgive the wind, gang. I'm just making do with the situation. So, these next 3 points all go together. Timing, placement, and priorities. Priorities is, I'm going to talk about priorities first. I made this chart a while back. All 10 points that I've listed, they're not in order of importance. They're essentially just getting all 10 of them out. So priorities is about what's important, and in anything you're doing as a manager, the 3 words that come back again and again and again are do what's important. The way one person put it is effective management is the result of doing the most important things first and then following through to see that they get done. If you don't get them done, you're not really moving forward. So whenever you're starting your day on your farm or ranch and you're with your team or a group of individuals and you've got this big list of things that needs to get done, you've got all the what, leaders put that together for you. You're the manager, you're gonna figure out how, the mechanics of getting everything done. You need to start out by doing the most important things. It might seem to take a little longer. You might be spending a little bit of wasted motion moving around, but if it truly is the most important thing and you've identified your priorities, you're always going to be best off doing what's most important. Sometimes that's based on profit on the farm. Sometimes there's a lot of what's important is going to ultimately be based on your goal, the whole goals of the farm or ranch. So a manager does not have to be a leader, but he needs to be in good communication with the leader. He needs to understand the basics of leadership, and he needs to understand how to discern what is important. Some farms, profit is going to be a higher priority. Other farms, education is going to be a higher priority. Other farms, lifestyle is going to be a higher priority. Everybody's going to have different values, but whatever it is for that unique farm or ranch, the manager needs to know what that farm's mission statement and goal is so that he can effectively manage the situation. So that's priorities. And so once you're thinking as a manager in terms of priorities and knocking goals out, along the way, you're also, and once that's settled, these other 2 considerations come into place, and I wrote this down. Think of all work in terms of time and space. So, and then 2 other things, you have loose schedules and critical points of action. As a manager, often you'll use calendars and dial in schedules. On a farm or ranch, it's not an 8 to 5 job, and you can only do so much scheduling. You really want to keep your schedules loose. Whenever I work a day, and I'll show this more in another video, whenever I've got a list of things to do, I put it down in the day timer, but I don't put times next to each item. I usually just write everything down, and then constantly throughout the day, based on what's happening, I'm checking to see what's the highest priority. Ideally, I have everything written down in the highest priorities, and also I know where everything's located, but I don't make a rigid schedule for myself, because that's not how a farm or ranch works. Too many things change on a farm or ranch. If you make a hard and fast schedule and you commit to a bunch of different, if you try to operate a really tight schedule, let's say you have all this work to do, but you've got, in whatever the case is, maybe you've got 4 appointments that you've designated with people. Well, if you've set those appointments in rigidly in your schedule and an emergency comes up, you're not going to be able to keep your word to those different people that you had appointments with, whatever the reason for the appointment, whether it was a phone call, meeting somewhere to do something. So being a farm manager, you need a schedule, but it has to be a loose schedule. The only things that need to be clearly delineated are the critical points of action. Sometimes you'll have those appointments and those commitments. Other times in a day, you've got critical things that have to happen at certain times in order for everything to work. And critical points of action are very important. But everything on the farm or ranch then falls under timing, the when, and the placement, or where. As you're going around your farm or ranch, you're always trying to think about how to cut out wasted time and motion. You're thinking about where everything is placed. You're thinking about the timing of everything. What I have done to help me with management is when I'm on a farm or ranch, and the bigger the scale, the more this is important. The more work you have, the more this matters. If I can plan my workload out 1 to 3 weeks in advance, farther is better. I can figure out all the end goals and objectives that I need to get done at the end of that 3-week period, and I'm rethinking this every single week, figuring out what my 3-week range is. I figure out, okay, all these things have to be here. Well, if I'm thinking that far ahead, I probably am driving by things that I could be doing during that 3 weeks. But if I wait and procrastinate, and I haven't laid things out in advance in my mind and in my day timer, and in another future episode, there's going to be part 3 to this. I'm going to show a little bit more of the nuts and bolts. I'm going to get my computer screen and show you a little bit more of the nitty-gritty of this, because somebody asked me to. But you're literally planning 3 weeks ahead, knowing all your end objectives, and as you're going around your farm or ranch, you're looking for things you can do to farther that. And that's within the parameters of doing what's important and everything else going on. And when you do that, you end up saving hours of time, not necessarily in one day, but over the weeks, you're adding up hours. Because if you don't plan ahead, you're going to get to a point on the farm or ranch and you don't have the tool you need, you don't have the parts or pieces you need to finish the project, or you're out of fuel, or your chainsaw's dull, and it's all because when you were at the shop, you didn't get it sharpened. And it could be something simple like that. It could be something like calling and placing your order of hay with your person on time. So those are 3 things, the first 3 items: timing, placement, and priorities. The 9th item is pretty simple, but it's incredibly hard. I've probably not met more than a handful of individuals, if that understand the importance of focusing. Saying no to things on a farm or ranch. Farming is a totally different lifestyle to what most people live in modern America. And if you're going to get things done, you're simply going to have to say no. You're going to have to decide, this is the lifestyle I want for myself, and I'm going to manage forward, knowing that when the football game's on or friends are going for a shindig, I may have to say no. It doesn't mean you never get to have fun. It means you know when you can do things and you know when you can't. You've got a bigger picture of what you're facing in the next few weeks, and you're going to say no when you have to. And the last item, I'm going to camp out here for a little bit. I titled it Efficient Thinking, and above it, I put the word awareness and then planner or strategist. And efficient thinking, keep in mind, this is not about effective thinking. That's what a leader does. This is about thinking efficiently, knowing how to do things right. Leaders do the right thing. Managers do things right. You're doing the job right. Efficient thinkers, that means that an individual doesn't waste their mental energy. that means instead of worrying, instead of cycling through things over and over again, you're able to think about something once and then move on from it. So it's efficient thinking is really not about thinking faster. What efficient thinking comes down to is one and done. You're able to handle an item in your mind once. It means when you get a phone call and your hand underneath you says, we're running low on hay, or your manager says, we've got 3 or 4 days less grass than we need, you're going to do one of two things. You're either going to write down a mental note because you know you don't have time to deal with it now, and it'll help you remember later, or you're going to immediately deal with the problem. If you're a good manager never procrastinates. You cannot deal with everything right when it happens. If you can deal with things right when they happen, that's ideal. But if you can't, you write it down so that you're not wasting mental energy trying to remember it later. And that's pretty simple in terms of thinking it through. It doesn't usually work out in practice for 90% of managers out there, but it can be done. It's simply, for me, it's a matter of keeping day timers, going through them consistently and typing them into computers and constantly organizing and filtering my information so that I keep my hard drive optimized. I will get into that more in the third video. So again, this is not about thinking quickly. You can think incredibly quickly and be incredibly inefficient because you're wasting motion spinning yourself in circles. It's kind of like watching a person walk by a piece of trash. The first time they walk by and they don't even notice it. The second time they notice it, they don't do anything about it. A good manager will notice it the first time, pick it up, and be done with it. A lot of people, and they pass trash and they never pick it up. And it just sits there and sits there and sits there. That's what's happening in your mind when you have work that you need to get done that you're alerted to. Maybe you just see it, that it needs to get done. Maybe it's something simple that only takes 1 minute, or maybe it's something that you get a call from a farmhand underneath you and he says, hey, this fence is in disrepair, we need to get on it. And you procrastinate, or you don't write it down on your day timer, you don't make a mental note to get it done, and 3-4 weeks later, it comes up again. A good manager deals with it the first time, and he prevents the forest fires from happening later in the business. So that's how you optimize. I put here optimized functions. What you're essentially doing is sharpening your brain. You need to view your brain as a powerful management tool, more powerful than a chainsaw or whatever you think of as your most powerful farm tool. You always do maintenance. If you're a good manager, you're always maintaining your tractors, you're always maintaining your chainsaws, you're maintaining, in my case a week ago I put a new clutch in my truck. I didn't have to put the clutch in. I could have kept driving the vehicle for another few weeks, but I knew there was an issue. I got on the front end of it, in other words. Even though I was busy, I knew this truck, I use it to get to work 6 days, well I use it 7 days a week actually driving. I use it that much, I need it that much. As soon as I know there's a serious issue coming up, I don't wait for it to get any worse, I deal with it. When you work your brain that way and you're constantly dealing with things as they come up, your brain is free to optimize and it can function at a higher level than if you're always having these loose ends and all of this stuff that you're not dealing with immediately. The last thing I'm going to mention about efficient thinking is, as a manager, you've got to be extremely aware of not only what's the most important thing, but of how you are thinking. I'm going to list just 2 methodologies for thinking as a manager. There are probably more. These are the 2 primary ones that I've seen. Essentially, you have the planner and you have the strategist. The planner thinks very sequentially, he thinks very linearly, he thinks very step by step. He's thinking ahead and he's putting things together. A planner is incredibly good at dealing with things when they are linear progressions, like building projects, fencing projects, demolition projects, those type things. A planner is essentially has an end goal in mind, and he is always thinking towards that end goal and planning it out step by step and working through it in his mind. He's not so much of a spur of the moment kind of guy. He doesn't generally like to shoot from the hip. He wants to think things through carefully and consistently. The strategist, on the other hand, is somebody that may or may not have a definitive end goal in mind, but in the moment, he is simply going to make his best move, whatever, with all the information he has available. He's going to use his ability to see ahead and not necessarily have an exact end goal, and he's just going to strategize. What's my best move here with what I know today? And both of those modes of thinking are actually necessary for a really good manager. A really good manager should be able to shoot from the hip. He should also be able to shoot for an end goal. Both are important in a farm or ranch business, and yeah, you're going to have to face both. So with that, gang, that's it for part 2 of Cornerstones of Management. Hopefully the video was helpful and an appropriate length. And with that, blessings for the journey, and keep it real.